Hello, my beautiful, beautiful witches. Welcome to Successful Witches, a podcast for indie romance lovers and writers, where we are obsessed with everything spice, smut, and happily ever afters. I have the absolute honor today of interviewing one of my current obsessions as an author, the beautiful, the wonderful Greta Rose West, who is a best-selling indie romance author who writes small-town Western romance, but it ain't sweet, which is what we're all about here, including the Cade Ranch series and the Whispered Dreams series. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Greta. I am so excited to have you here. Welcome, welcome. If you want to introduce yourself to everyone watching along, listening along, let us know a little bit about you. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, I'm Greta, and I live right outside of Chicago, Illinois, in the US. And I'm obsessed with cowboys. So I wrote a 5-book series, my first series with 5 cowboy brothers, and they all have a romance and get their HEA. I've now started a spin-off from that, doing some more stories from some people that live in their little small town that the cowboys live in, which is Whisper, Wyoming. It's a fictional town, but it's by the Teton Mountains, like where Jackson Hole is in Wyoming. And I don't know, what else do you want to know? I have one son, I have one husband, 2 cats who I spoil, and they act like that. They're very badly behaved, but they're super cute. And I'm obsessed with writing. Like, writing and reading is pretty much all I do.
Well, you're in good company, because I could pretty much tick off like most of that box as well. I was like, just substitute the cats for dogs.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen them. I've seen them on your Instagram.
Yeah, horrendously spoiled, but I love them to pieces.
Yep. They're like kids, when my son calls, he lives in California, and so he'll call and I'll tell him, like, I'm talking about his sisters, the cat what that day, or what trouble they got into, and he's like, Mom, they're cats.
Well, they're the best writing companions, aren't they?
Yeah.
They don't, other than being demanding, they're not interrupting they're not trying to talk to you mid writing or anything like that.
You would think that they don't, but mine do. One of mine does. If I'm really in a groove and I'm writing, she gets mad that I'm not paying attention to her, and she will like circle my feet and just yowl at me until I stop and let her in my lap and pet her and pay attention to her. And sometimes I have to hold her and write with one hand, or else I have to lock her out of the room, and it breaks my heart.
Does she sit on your keyboard? We used to have a cat like years and years and years ago growing up, and that was his favorite trick, was if he got to the point where he was fed up with your shit, he would sit on the keyboard.
Yep. And that was fine if I was just reading a book, or if I'm looking at Instagram or something. But if I'm writing and I'm like, this is an important document, like, you can't sit on my keyboard. You're gonna, delete something or ruin something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm trying to get them to not do that. So, trying to like train them away from it, but they're cats. They don't have to train.
They run the show. They're like the tiny CEOs of your indie romance empire.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which, speaking of, let's talk a little bit about how you first got started as an indie romance author, because it is, I just have to say that I am currently working my way through the Cade Ranch series and I'm obsessed. Jack, please marry me. Ditch Evie, marry me.
Me too.
So tell us all about how you got started. Were you always a writer? Like, give us all the goss behind the scenes.
Okay, well, so I guess I wrote a little bit in high school, never a book, but some poetry, some short stories, a few maybe. I had a really great teacher in high school, and my literature teacher, and so he was always giving me really cool books to read. And I've always been a reader, though, since grade school, middle school. And I never read romance until I was in, I don't know, maybe like my late 20s, almost 30. My sister, she likes PNR, paranormal romance. And so she was like, oh, you got to read this book. And I don't even remember what it was. I tried to go back and read it, I don't know, a year or so ago, and it was awful. But you know, it was very smutty. And so I don't know, I just really, really liked that. And then like I would go on these kicks where I read everything I could get my hands on, but then I wouldn't read for a year or 2 years or something.
Mm.
And then she brought me back into it. And, you know, she said, you got to read Twilight. So I did. I read that and devoured them, of course. You know, they're good. They're good. They're good. And so that got me into it again. And then I just started reading everything romance. Like before it was some romance, but then it just kind of became everything romance, although Twilight's not that romancy, but it kind of opened the door. And so I used to only read paranormal. Like that was just what I always was craving. So like the Black Dagger Brotherhood series. Oh God, those guys are so hot. um, and so I don't know. And so then I was reading some books. Gosh, I'm not even sure how to kind of classify them. They've got vampires and immortals, um, just all kinds of different PNR kind of characters. But I was reading one and I really liked the character, so I emailed the author. Like I had never even noticed in the back of books that you could email somebody or, you know, connect with the author. I'd never even crossed my mind. But for some reason, one day I saw her email. So I emailed her and I just said, you know, gosh, I love this character. I've read all these books. Um, just wanted to tell you, you know, keep going. Love what you're doing. And so she emailed back and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. I didn't know they did that. And so we started talking a
There's
little.
a real life person.
Yeah. And so she was like, do you want to be a beta reader? Or no, she said, do you want to be an ARC reader? And I was like, I don't know what that is. Hold on, let me Google it. So, okay, well, I get a free copy of the book if I provide a review. Great, sure, okay. So she sent me one, and I guess she liked my review, or she kind of introduced me to some other people on Goodreads in a group that also ARC read for her. And so I was kind of talking with them and, you know, making friends. And she emailed me after that book and said, do you want to be a beta reader? And so I said, okay, let me Google that. I don't know what that is. And so then she said, okay, so well, I write chapter by chapter and I send out chapters. So if you, you know, then you can catch like typos and things that don't, you know, flow or whatever. If I say that guy has blue eyes, but he's supposed to have brown eyes and you remember, but I don't, then you can tell me that stuff. So I started doing that. And I think it was the first book maybe that I beta read for her. And, you know, because she sent them chapter by chapter. So I was seeing how the story connected a little bit at a time. And in my head, it was just clicking, click, 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 like, you have a story in your head. So why can't you do this? So I just did. I just sat down one day. Well, okay, let me back up. I don't want to get too maudlin here, but my dad passed away. It was very traumatic for me. Like really actually very traumatic. And so I was really not dealing with that very well. And normally my response to something like that was just to dive into books and not come out for a very long time, which is exactly what I did. And that was in the time that I was reading these books for this author. And so when it started clicking and I just sat down and I just like literally put my fingers on the keyboard and pushed them to type, it also clicked in my head that this was a way for me to let that stuff out. All the negative stuff and all the trauma and all the anxiety and all of that. It was somewhere for me to put it because I didn't have anywhere to put it and I didn't have any way to process what I was feeling about it. So that's what those books did for me. I mean, And I feel like that's why they are so angsty and so emotional, because that's where it comes from. It's from my angst and my emotion. So that's how it started. And then I just kept going until I had written 5 books. And then I sent them to an editor and he was like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, 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 no. We got to go back. So I had lots of editing to do and lots of learning. I just kind of threw myself into craft books and um, save the cat and reading about plots and beats and a gazillion more romance books, just so that then I could see how those things work after I have them in my head and I know what they mean, then go read a bunch of books and see how is this author using them and how did they make that work. And so I just kind of dove in. That was 2019 when I started. Um, and then I sent it to an editor, the first book in 2020, and I have not come out of that deep dive since. And what is it now? 3. So it's been 3 years.
So
It's been
you wrote all 5 before you handed them over to an editor.
well, no, I wrote the first 3.5. I had maybe like half of book 4 done.
Wow.
First one, and yeah, and then he wrote back and he was like, wait a minute, you can't do this. Well, no, not that he told me I couldn't do something, but just that the way I was doing things was like stunting my own growth, like if you split this story up and do this way, then you have room to make 5 whole books. And then you have ways to spin off from these books. But if you're just trying to fit them all into 2 or 3 books, then you're losing that ability to grow and do. And I didn't know that. But so
Wow.
yeah, so I went back and I had a lot of restructuring to do and editing and just kind of rearranging
Well,
my brain, basically.
having just finished reading book 3, which is Kevin and Luke, who I'm just so in love with, so
Me
obsessed
too.
with their story. It also broke me while I was reading it away. I was in,
Yeah, that
I
one
was
was
in
hard.
Greta's DMs going, oh my God, I'm halfway through this book.
Yeah, that one was hard. I cried while I wrote that.
Oh,
But I'm
oh,
sure that I know the scene you're talking about, and I cried for, I don't know, 2 or 3 days. I just sobbed.
I can imagine. And having just read that book, I can see how, because your books are so beautifully interwoven, they now have obviously their whole own standalone story, but the backstories and the things that are going on around the characters really do overlap. So I can see how, like you're saying, that when it first started out, this is what it looked like because it was kind of one big story almost. And now
Yeah,
it's been distilled into these individual love stories, but there
yeah,
are bigger notes and threads and events that cross and
yeah,
intertwine. I'm already, in anticipation, because you've sowed those seeds of what is to come in books 4 and 5, that I already
yeah,
know that those two are going to start intertwining as well in the
yeah,
background.
yeah. And at first, that was, man, I remember getting the first developmental edit back from my editor, and he wrote like I don't know, it was 17 or 19 page edit letter.
Wow.
Yeah, it was big, and I was just so overwhelmed. But and at first I wanted to strangle him, but now I now I see the wisdom
Mm.
that he was trying to impart, um and now I think that way. So when I'm writing it, I'm thinking about all the things that I've learned so that the new stories don't have to go through such crazy edits. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, that was
Well,
pretty scary to
yeah,
see.
when you first start, you don't know what you don't know, right? And you just
Right.
are having to jump in the arena and kind of flail around and make those
Yeah.
mistakes. And as you say, then ask for constructive feedback without getting caught in the emotion of, oh my God, somebody just read my baby and told me all the things that were wrong with it.
Yeah, I know. And I thought, I was so afraid that I would get back the criticism and just be
Mm,
crushed. And I was a little bit, but more than that, I just wanted it to be good. And I
mm,
knew that this guy had plenty of experience and he's been doing it for years and years. And so I just knew like I have to listen to him. And he even said, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he even was like, "Oh, wow, I thought I'd never hear from you again. I thought I'd send you this stuff and you'd be like, whatever, kiss my butt, you know."
Here's 20
And
pages of feedback. Maybe
yeah,
I'll hear from you.
he was like, well, he's like, I know that there's a story there and I know that it's good. I know you can make it good. But I just thought, are you going to be one of those people that, just can't hear it, just can't
Mm,
hear the criticism because it's so emotional and personal that it's just too hard to really grasp what somebody is trying to tell you. And he was like, you either are that kind of person or you're not. And I'm like, well, I kind of am because ouch, yes, it did hurt. But also everything you're saying is right. I can see it. I know you're right. And now I just like, he was like, take some time, think it over, really, go back and read it again and think and see what you think after you process a little bit. And I couldn't. Like the next day I was like, I can't, I have to go now. So I just opened up a new document and I started copying and pasting and editing and adding new stuff. And I was like I felt like a mad scientist. I just couldn't stop. So yeah, that's when I knew I was hooked on writing
wow.
because if doing revisions and edits is fun, then you've got a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, you're on the hook forever. If you can find the enjoyment in that process, I think.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
yeah,
And now I love
you
them.
find
That's my favorite part is getting back and edit and then diving back in to do revisions. I love it. I can't wait for it.
yeah, I actually really, really personally love when it gets to that beta reader phase. Like I am just such a junkie for the immediate reactions and the reader reactions and the
Yeah,
feedback of, what it's
yeah,
like for them experiencing it. And even if it is something as simple as this line didn't flow for me or it didn't quite read well for me, I love hearing that because it's almost like getting to sit next to someone while they read it and just see
yeah.
how they're enjoying the book. And we don't get that for so much of the time as authors. So yeah, I really love that process
And
too.
isn't that so helpful? Because it's like, you know, it helps you to know the temperature of the book. Like, is this stuff landing? Like, I can laugh and cry and think I'm the best writer in the whole wide world, but then I send it to people and they're not laughing at the same places I'm laughing, or, so it helps us to know how they're taking it and how what we're doing and how we're doing it is going to resonate with other readers. And that's always interesting to me, the
Yeah.
things that people do love or don't love, or whatever. I that's always interesting.
And that notion of translating humor onto the page is such a talent. And I have to say that that's one of the things I've really loved within the
Really?
Cade Ranch books so far. Like just those little moments of the banter between the brothers, it's like the tiniest lines. I think the one that gets me every time is whenever there's reference to Finn's bedroom. Like that just makes me laugh out loud, like every single time when they're like, no, 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 don't go in there. Don't go in. And then there's invariably someone saying, is this a 13-year-old boy? Like, what is going on in here?
There's more of that in this book too.
Without
That's so funny. It's so funny that you say that because in real life, I am not funny. Like even my husband and my son will be like, "Was that a joke? That wasn't funny. What did you just say? That made no sense." Like the things in my head that are funny, I think are funny, but there's some kind of disconnect between in here and out here that I don't know. So I kind of love that. I love that I can be funny because I'm just not. I'm kind of dorky and like I'm the person who says a dumb thing or sticks their foot in their mouth or, whatever. And I'm just like, oh, I can't believe I said that. And then walk. embarrassed. That's me. I'm not funny in real life at all.
Well, I think that's author brain, right? That you can take something that is quite complicated in your brain in terms of like setting up a joke or like something that is a funny situation. And I mean, in writing that, there's often setup that happens like pages before the actual thing pays off. So it
Yeah,
does come out differently than just someone who's able to sit and like conversationally be
yeah,
witty or have a quick reply. Like we've had kind of months to think about the, the setup of a joke or something like that.
yeah,
And the other thing that I really enjoyed with Kevin and Luke's book was the humor that came in between them, especially towards the end. Like again, I don't want to spoil any books for anyone, but you know, when they're able to talk and the things that Luke's mispronouncing and then being sort of pulled up on, but it's in that loving, just kind of bantery way that I really enjoyed those moments. That they're just such subtle things in the books, but they really are funny. And yeah, I mean that alone, just to tangent off into that, the fact that you were able to write a Dutch character, I mean, that
yeah,
just that must have been huge. And I know I read at the back that you were talking about your own journey with like learning Dutch and
yeah.
having people that you went to. Like, do you want to talk about that for a moment? Because writing with another language going on, wow.
Well, I so when I sent those first couple books to the editor,
Mm,
I guess maybe I sent it anyway. So anyway, I was working on the third book and then, changing things, and I just I don't know, this character just appeared, like he just popped in my head, and I just knew that as soon as I knew who he was in my head, then I knew who Kevin was, and
mm,
like what were his problems, what were his obstacles, what was his point. But as soon as I knew the Luke character, then I knew Kevin, easy peasy.
mm,
So I took Dutch in college. I think I only took a year of it, 2 semesters. Um, and so I was in no way fluent. And that was many years ago. Um, but in the group that I was in on Goodreads, with the other authors' books when I was first beta reading, there was a woman in there, and I thought I remembered that she was from the Netherlands.
mm,
So I looked it up, and yes, she was. So I emailed her and I said, "Hey, I'm writing this book, and the character is Dutch, and I love that language, but I'm really bad at it. So would you read it?" Because I already knew she was a beta reader and an ARC reader. And it turned out she actually likes writing stories too. She doesn't publish, but she just loves books in any form. So she was all gung ho and excited to do it. So she read it, and then and she just helped me like get the phrasing right, and making sure like it fit, like how a Dutch person would joke around, or if
mm,
they were upset, or if they were, in stress, in something, something that was stressing them out. Did I get the reaction right? Things like that. And then so she and I were just talking, chatting, and so I just love reading her words and listening to her. So I I just started relearning. I'm still relearning. I take a Dutch lesson every day, but yeah, I love it. I love that language. And my son takes well, not anymore, but he was doing German in school, and he's pretty good at it too. So he and I are kind of nerds about it, and we sit around and talk about the difference of, because a lot of German and Dutch words are similar, especially verbs. So we'll sit and say, "What's the verb for this?" And then he'll say it, and I'll say, "Well, in Dutch, it's this." And then we're just geeks.
fascinating because it's also and it's something that you pull out in that book a lot, the difference between thinking in a language, learning in a language, and speaking in a language. And I really love, there's, I think, a scene, and I can't remember who asks Luke the question. It might be Ollie. I could be wrong, but they say something like, when you're, are you thinking in Dutch right now? And he answers, well, it depends on the situation. Because if for those who haven't read this book, he's a vet. So he says, if I'm talking vet speak, I can think in English because I learned it in English. And then if I'm trying to think of like emotional things, it's in Dutch and I'm having to translate it. And then there was sort of the third one that was kind of just a hodgepodge, I think, of the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you wrote that so beautifully in terms of like the sentences and the thought process when he sort of starts in English, descends into Dutch, and then goes back into English again once he's figured out what he's trying to say. And it just got me so much. I loved it.
That's cool. I mean, I just I don't know, like I guess because I was relearning the language, and so it was just really at the forefront of my mind how I was trying to think in Dutch and speak it. Like, he always says that when he should say this, or vice versa, because that's what I do when I'm doing my Dutch lesson. I still do it, but I should be better at it by now. But yeah, that the word for this or the word for that, I always mix them up. And so I just, use that in the book. But I figured that, if that's hard for me, I would say I'm pretty good at learning languages. I mean, I'm not a whiz or anything, but I'm pretty okay at it. I've always done well with that kind of thing. So I thought, like, if this is what's stopping me up when I'm taking the lessons, then I would think that it would be the same for anybody trying to learn a language, well, a Germanic language, not, I'm sure it's a lot different if you're learning like Japanese. I just started trying to learn Japanese like a couple days ago. Wow, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. But the Germanic languages, there's so many similarities and things that are the same. Not the words per se, although Dutch does have a lot of words that are similar in English, but like the cadence of the language and like sentence structure and stuff like that can be similar. So that was kind of an easy thing for me to do. That's so cool that you picked up on it though, because I guess I've never really thought about it like that.
Oh, I loved it so much. And I think it really hit home for me that even though my family background is not dual language or anything like that, I grew up in overseas, predominantly all over the world. And so everywhere I went to school throughout up until 18 years old was, the majority of my classmates, English was a second language, or if it was their first language, they spoke a second language at home because mum or dad or, family were from wherever around the world. It was a real international selection of people. And it just really hit home for me because it felt so familiar. Like so many of my friends and friendship groups and things, the conversations we would have that, and you would get into those bantery kind of, when you know someone well enough, you can kind of end up, you're not mocking them, but you're able to play on the things that, it's no different to if they were to, I don't know, mispronounce a word or whatever in a language that is their first language. It's we all have these little things that we kind of roughhouse around our friends on, right? And I think that was the real fun thing that you captured really well with that dynamic. And I mean, of course, as well, a delicious input into what is essentially like a cowboy romance series, right? That you've got this very international, sophisticated, suave Dutch vet god coming into the community.
Yeah.
So
well, it had to be somebody special for Kevin, right? Like it had to be somebody truly spectacular to pull him out of his own ass, basically.
Yeah.
Like
it had to be that you will never get better than this, honey. You need to do something.
Yeah. Come on now. Come on now.
So
Yeah.
just to backtrack slightly, how did the cowboy romance genre come about for you, or the what inspired the Cade Ranch kind of setting or anything like that? Because, I'm just fascinated that this world that you've created is so vivid.
Well, I think my dad always wanted to be John Wayne. So he his whole life he wanted horses. And my youngest sister, was just loved horses. I mean, she used to just sit there and cry because she didn't have a horse. And so my dad raised us, three girls, on his own. He was a single dad, and so there really was never money for that kind of thing. But the older we got, he went to school and became an electrician, and so he got a better job, and so things were getting a little better, and so finally he could afford it, and so they got a horse, and she used to show it at the fair, or um honestly, I don't know where she used to take that horse, but anyway, and then they ended up getting a second horse, and so I spent a lot of time caring for the horses,
Mm.
and learned to ride, and spent lots of summers shoveling horse poop. Um,
Which has
but
that
so
come through in is it Jay's character that like fucking hates shoveling like the horse shit or something?
yeah,
Is that
yeah,
like the Greta,
it's not,
the angsty Greta moment of like fucking hate these horses?
yeah, it's not fun shoveling horse shit. It's really not fun. And where the place where we used to board the horses where I worked would be, I mean, there was like a mountain of horse shit taller than me. I mean, I'm not super tall, but like taller than me. And I had to run the wheelbarrow full of horse poop up the horse poop mountain, dump it on top. And in the wintertime, when all that shit is literally frozen shit, like it is not fun. Not fun. And when you slide on it and like fall down, yeah, that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
But yeah, but then I grew up in Northwest Indiana, which is right outside of Chicago, but uh I moved to Las Vegas with a friend of mine from high school, and in my mid 20s, and that's where I met my husband, that's where I had my son, and then eventually I lived there for 13 years, but then we moved back there, from Las Vegas back to Northwest Indiana. And on our drive back, moving back, driving a minivan with a U-Haul attached to the back of it, which was very, very scary. Um, we drove up, we tried to make it fun for our son. He was only 10 at the time.
Mm.
So we were trying to make it fun. So we kind of made it into a road trip. And so we drove up through Utah and little corner of Idaho into Wyoming. Well, I had never been to Wyoming before,
Mm.
and I don't know what it was. It's spiritual at this point. As soon as we crossed the border from Idaho, like Idaho's gorgeous, Utah's gorgeous, beautiful. I mean, just amazing, amazing views everywhere you look. But the minute we crossed the border into Wyoming, I was transfixed. It is so beautiful. I have never been anywhere more beautiful. I mean, like almost can't put it into words. The trees are so big and they're so green, and those mountains, they're just these huge. I can't even.
Mm.
They're just, I mean, it's beautiful. And then we went up to Yellowstone, and we took him through and went and saw the geysers, and the mud pits and all the really cool stuff that you can see there. Saw all kinds of cool animals,
Mm.
and just all kinds of stuff. And then we drove back down to Jackson. The whole area is kind of called Jackson Hole, but Jackson, Wyoming. And it's this cowboy town. Um, it's like a little artsy town too. There's lots of cool art things that you can do there, and places to go see it. And it's like a whole different world. And I literally cried when we were leaving that city. Like I was crying and just telling my husband, please, please, let's not go. I don't want to go anymore. I want to stay here. Like we could find jobs, we could find an apartment or something. Like we'll be fine. It'll be fine. The kid won't care. He'll love it here. And yeah, that wasn't the plan. So, and of course we didn't stay, but yeah, I mean, I for real cried. Like I just didn't want to leave it. Um, I don't know. I felt something being there. I was connected to it somehow. Maybe that sounds kind of silly, but I don't know. I just loved it. And we're going back. I'm doing my first signing in a month, a little over a month, and it's in South Dakota. And so we're gonna drive out there and drive to the Tetons. And we don't have a lot of time to spend because my husband's schedule won't kind of allow for it, but we're gonna drive out there and just piddle around for a couple of days before the signing and then go to the signing. I'm so excited. I can't wait.
It's going to be amazing. Oh my
Yeah, but that's
God.
where that came from. And I truly can't explain it. I don't know why. You know what I think though? I have a suspicion. I read these books in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s by Tim Sandlin. There's a book called Skipped Parts. I think there's 3 books in that series. And they're contemporary fiction. There's a little bit of romance in them, but they're based in the Tetons in Wyoming. And so I can remember descriptions that he'd written about them, and I don't know, that's what the pull was maybe for me to really want to see it. But then as soon as I got there, I don't know. I can't describe it. It just like
And
I fell in love.
And it obviously gave you that visceral connection that then has now translated onto the page so
Yes. Yeah.
powerfully.
That, like Jack, the first cowboy in my first book, Jack, he was this character inside my head for I can't even remember how long, like forever. But I'd never written a book before. I had no plans to write a book. So I would just think about this guy and I don't even, that sounds crazy, but um he was just in there, like he was just lurking inside my brain somehow. And then once we drove through Wyoming and once that place, then he started to kind of,
Mm,
it started to kind of churn more, but it took what, 10 more years
wow.
until I started writing. And really it was like, I don't, this sounds silly, but like, I feel like I like tucked him away. Like I kept him tucked in my pocket of my
Mm,
brain. And then when I needed him, when I needed something to get me through this, huge trauma that I was trying to deal with, he was just there.
it was.
It
Wow.
sounds so funny when I've tried to explain it before, but I just really can't. And then I just pulled him out and set him down and put him on the page. And then it's like, the rest was history.
Wow. That's incredible. And he honestly is such a vivid character. Like, I mean, all your characters are, but he really struck that chord of exactly like you
Yeah.
say, like he's just so um yeah, I don't know, like present and commanding and feels like because he's a very, stoic, silent character, but the depth to him is there. And so obviously that time when he was just sort of like accumulating all of that lived experience being in your brain
Yeah.
somewhere, that
Yeah. So
even though he's the strong silent type, it's
yeah.
very yeah, he's very much got much more than surface level meets the eye when he's on the page. Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm a believer in things happen for a reason. So
Mm,
I don't know that I was before, but I am now because um just so many things had to
mm,
so many things I had to live through or experience and you know places I needed to go and people I needed to meet,
mm,
for this to come to fruition. If you had asked me back then if I would ever write a book, I would have laughed at you. And then if you had asked me, would I go ahead and publish it on my own with no help from anyone and promote myself and say, hey, look at me, come over here and look at me, look what I'm doing. Oh my God, no way, no way. I would have died laughing.
Yeah.
I would have died of embarrassment. Like, no, no one's gonna see what I'm doing. No one's gonna read words I write. Are you kidding me? I would never do that.
Never
But
mind
then,
the fact that it's like in amongst all the emotion and the characters and everything, it's like writing romance is a whole thing as well, right? You know,
yeah,
being comfortable
yeah,
with people seeing you write, you know, smutty,
yes,
steamy, you know,
yeah. I mean, at
dirty
first I was
talking
embarrassed.
cowboys.
At first it embarrassed me, but just for a very short time. Like when I first started writing it, because mine are very open door,
Yeah.
there's no closed doors, there's no fade to black.
Oh, they are
It's all
chef's
right there.
kiss. Chef's kiss open door.
So at first I embarrassed myself. Just, I'm sitting in the dark writing and I'm just like, oh my God, what am I doing? And then when I first I sent it to my best friend, my two best friends, and they both read it. And I was just mortified, but then I got a little bit of feedback like, okay, you can do this. Like that was the best part of the whole book.
Yeah.
So something clicked once I got a little bit of feedback and knew that it wasn't awful. And now I'm fine with it. Now that's the least embarrassing part of it to
Yeah.
me. I feel like the emotions and mm, I don't know, like the intellectual part of it, the story structure and things like that make a successful book. Like that stuff, if I get that wrong, I'll be embarrassed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't.
I always
I've
say
had enough
it's
sex
like
in my life, and
finding,
now I can't get that wrong.
yeah, and I mean, for me personally, like with what I choose to read, I want to know that like the spicy, smutty goodness is there, but I also want a story, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm not just reading it for the sex. Like I'm reading it for the story and the characters. And you know,
yeah,
that is the bit I feel the same, that it's like that's the bit that I put probably, you know, not more effort into, but I'm more concerned about in terms of making sure that people really are swept
yeah,
away by the story and the story arc of the characters and things like that.
yeah.
Um,
I
mm,
like when my sister would bring me these books and say, "Oh, you got to read this, you got to read that," and so I'd go and read them, and they were good, like but it's just a different kind of story. It
mm,
was like a quicker read and like more about the smut, basically.
mm, mm,
And they were good and they serve a purpose, and I'm not dissing them in any way. Just I wanted to, I wanted the whole pie.
yeah,
I wanted the smut, but I also wanted that heartwarming, really emotional story. Like if I'm reading, I don't know. No, now I'm not going to be able to think of any, but what's
we
that guy?
we want plot, right? Like we want plot.
Nicholas Sparks. Nicholas Sparks. I wanted Nicholas Sparks and raunchy sex
Yeah.
together.
Is it too
Why
much to
can't we have
ask?
both? Yeah, that's like that's my perfect book. If I'm going to pick up a book, that would be, that would be the kind of perfect thing. I want all that
Mm,
love story and rich community and rich
mm.
storytelling, but I also want the smut. I can't read a book if it doesn't have smut in it anymore. Like I'm just
Yeah.
bored to pieces.
Yeah. Well, and that's why we end up writing what we love reading, right? Because that's what we're looking for as much as we're
Yeah,
inspired creatively, you know, have these things that we are just drawn to. We're also busy writing the books that we would love to read and
yeah,
are out there looking for. And I think that's why for me, even though I write paranormal, dark fantasy romance, like I am always really drawn to cowboy romance and things like that because it's got the types of characters that I don't know, this might sound strange, but I find them very parallel to the types of, particularly like the male main characters you get in paranormal romance. Like have got that similar energy about them. And so I fucking love reading like cowboy romance, things like that, because it
yeah.
and I love
Yeah,
reading
it's that
about,
strength, right? Like
yeah,
cowboys always have that strength, and the guys in paranormal romance, they always have something that makes them strong somehow,
mm,
even if they're not like Jack, he doesn't, you can barely get a word out of the guy, but he's strong in other ways. And
Yeah.
I feel like all paranormal romance male characters are that way. There's some kind of strength that just draws you to them.
And they often have got trauma that means that they're not very good at talking about emotions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, if you're living in a paranormal world, like
Yeah.
you're gonna have issues, because there's gonna be vampires or werewolves or something that screwed up they attacked your mom or they killed your sister, something like that. World is just gonna be like it's like perfect because the trauma is already it's already established, like it's not.
Yeah.
I don't know, in a way, I guess maybe that's dumb, but
No,
yeah,
like it is. And I was talking to a friend about this the other day, that I was like, I love writing it. And then I often think about, if I was plonked into this world that I'm creating, I would be the character that dies within like the first chapter.
I say that all the time. I say that. I said that last night. Husband and I were watching, oh, what's that called? Invasion on Apple TV. Have you seen it?
I haven't.
It is so scary. It's kind of like War of the Worlds, that movie.
Oh, yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
book, wasn't it? But to the one with Tom Cruise, that was, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago or something like that. And I remember my son loved it. And I remember watching it, and he would get scared, but it was the good kind of scared. So we're watching this show, and I was even more scared than when we watched War of the Worlds. And I was talking to my husband, and I said, just kill me. If something like this happens, if aliens take over our planet or something, just kill me. Because I'm going to be that idiot that can't get up when the alien's coming after her, and she's going to fall down right in front of it, and he's going to kill her. Just kill me. Just take me out before we even get to that. I don't want to be killed by an alien.
Yeah. I know, it's and then it's like the fact that your brain can be, as an author, like that you personally can have that sort of, that's how you would react, but you're putting yourself into the shoes of all these other characters being terribly heroic and amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Isn't it weird?
I love it. And yeah, that's why I think I just have such a soft spot for particularly the sort of like cowboy romance genre, because of the fact that it feels like that energy of that I really enjoy reading, in terms of these very kind of feisty heroines, strong women, and also these men that are kind of living superhuman lives, even though it might be within an ordinary contemporary setting. They're doing things that ordinary people cannot do without incredible knowledge or training or skill, and these sorts of things, like working with horses and working the land and things. And of course it's very feels very relevant for where we are here in where I live in New Zealand, because it's very rural and we're surrounded by farmland and high country, kind of big estates that are very probably similar to what you're writing about with the ranches. And
you have cowboys there?
Yeah, we do. Like we are probably like so I live in the region that's called Otago, and it's very like cowboy territory. Like we're like New Zealand cowboys basically.
Do they wear the hats? Cowboy hats?
Some do. They more pull them out for like the fancy occasions. It's not like it's not a day-to-day thing, but yeah, there's a lot of flannel, a lot of a lot of like the cowboy jeans, a lot of camouflage.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's how they dress here too. Nobody, I mean, occasionally you'll see somebody wearing a hat, but I mean, we're near Chicago, but I'm in a little town in Indiana that's it's not rural, but I mean the town's not that big, and there's a lot of rural stuff around us. So there's a lot of farmers, and yeah, they wear a lot of camo or flannel, or
yeah.
But the jeans are good. The jeans are good anywhere you go, right? Tight
Yeah,
fitting jeans.
you can appreciate them everywhere in any country. So speaking of good jeans, we need to talk about your book that is coming out, and that is another, it's the offshoot of the Cade Ranch world, isn't it? This,
Yes.
yeah. So, and because I'm still making my way through this series, this is new territory for me. I haven't encountered these characters, I don't believe.
Well, you have Frank was in book 2, Ollie and Dean's book.
Oh.
He was the deputy that came with the sheriff to check out Ollie's property when they thought someone was, yeah, he was just mentioned in a very small passing. So but this is him. I just got the proof from Amazon. That's it.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at
Deputy
that.
Frank Sims.
Wow. He is a
There's
whole lot of deputy.
yeah. Yeah. So he's another grumpy character like Jack. But so yeah, it is Grumpy Sunshine trope. It comes out on Thursday. But he is the deputy sheriff, and he meets the local librarian. They got a new librarian, and so this series is a spin-off of the Cade Ranch series. So we're not on the ranch anymore, but we're in the little town that the ranch is near, Whisper, Wyoming, which is pretty much like if you look it up on a map, you'll find Wilson, Wyoming, and that's close to where it would be. Although Wilson, Wyoming is a much different town. That's like a ski resort, jet set rich people kind of place, which is not Whisper at all. Whisper is very rural, small, dusty Wyoming town. And so that series talks about all the people that live there. So the first book was The Sheriff, and that is a second chance romance. And then the second one is, have you met him yet? Brady. Yeah, you've met him in Kevin and Luke's book. Brady and Luke, I mean Brady and Theo in book 2. And then the third book, which is Frank's book, is Mountains Divide Us, and that is Frank the deputy, and then the new librarian, who you will also meet in the second book in that series. Anyway, so it's the librarian and the deputy, Grumpy Sunshine, and he's older. He's 19 years older than her. And she has some things to overcome in her own past. She's 30, but she's been through a little something, and something she kind of needs to learn a lesson about some things, and she needs to learn to love herself no matter her shortcomings. And Frank helps her do that, even though he's grumpy. But I love this character. Like, I didn't think that I could love a character more than I love Jack Cade, because he was my first, and because I, was already in love with him before I even started writing that book. But I have come to be so in love with this character that I almost couldn't send it. To ARC readers. Like I kept putting it off because I was just like, he's just so perfect right now, and I can't take it if somebody doesn't love him. But I've gotten over that, and then I sent him to the same person who we have been beta reading for. I sent the beta to her, and she she made some really good comments about things that Frank does in the book that are really sexy, which just made me, I was rolling on the floor. But from her perspective, because she also writes paranormal romance, she is not at all into country romance, or so I knew that if I could make her fall in love with Frank, then I was on the right track, and she's totally in love with him. So so I finally sent him out to ARC readers, and I'm getting nothing but good stuff back. So I can't wait.
Of course, because if you were in love with him, then we know that everyone else is going to be in love with him. Yeah.
I hope.
Inevitable. And I also really love that it's an age gap, but that she's 30, because I think while I love an age gap romance, I also tend to get a little bit like, yeah, they're 18, they're 18, they're 18. But
Oh, yeah.
I love having heroines, and particularly age gap heroines that are a little bit older and they've lived a bit, and they've had their life, and they've got
Yeah.
things that, as you say, like they've got things that need to be
Yeah.
resolved of their own. They're not just sort of this kind of young person who's not really gone away and lived their life.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And I mean, but if you think about it, like if I was dating somebody that was 20 years older than me, I mean, yeah, I'm a fully adult person. I'm not going to say my age here, but yeah, I mean, I've lived,
Yeah.
but even still, if I was dating somebody who's 20 years older than me, um, there's going to be differences. We grew up in different decades, so,
Mm.
um, yeah, I've had people say like they they were disappointed because they read so many age gap romances where the girl is really young and the guy is older. But this felt different because she's actually a little bit older. Um,
Mm.
and I had one reader say, couldn't you make the guy younger and the girl older? I'm an old lady and I want to I want to read a story about me getting the guy. And I was like, well, I suppose I could write one of those, but that's just not Frank. Like
Yeah.
it just wouldn't work with this character. But um,
Yeah.
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. I mean, I've read some that I really like. But yeah, I'm getting older myself. Like I there's a lot of books and tropes that I used to read that I loved that I would devour, and now I'm not interested in them. Things your reading taste change so much, and I feel like that
Mm.
really is affected by getting older.
Mm. And I think I'm very aware of it in writing paranormal, that because for such a long time, paranormal romance had sort of just like an inbuilt age gap thing, right? Like you so often had the 20 something
Oh
year
yeah,
old female main character who meets and falls in love with the 2000-year-old vampire, kind of thing.
yeah,
And so it's like inherently been there in that genre for a long time. And I really love kind of playing with it and subverting it, and having characters that we come across at first and think they're one age, and then actually it turns out that they're a lot older. And I just
right.
like playing around with it and giving the female main characters a lot more lived life around them. I like playing with that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also
It's funny.
even just making sure that we have female main characters that are strong and independent as fuck, and like they might be
Yeah.
swooning over their hunky cowboy, but they've actually, and this is your female characters that I've read so far, they've gone away and had like their own experiences. They've had done a lot of
Yeah.
living.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, I never really think about them being like me because I don't really I don't really think they are like me.
Mm.
I mean, maybe small bits here and there, um but when you say it like that, then yeah, I guess they are because I'm in my 40s. I've lived I've gone
Yeah,
through some stuff. So, yeah, maybe I guess that's where that comes from, but
yeah, they're
yeah.
kind of.
And I would say I kicked ass because like just out of nowhere wrote these books and like I'm just kind of sitting back right now looking at stuff like, how did you do that? I have no idea, but I'm so
Yeah.
proud of myself.
Yeah. And the fact that you carried the idea for so long before you then just suddenly burst into this, writing supernova of like 3 books.
Yeah.
Bang.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Oh, I love it. I love it. And I could probably keep you here all day picking your brain about things and asking you questions. But please let us know where everyone can get hold of not only Mountains Divide Us, that is coming out, and also where they can connect with you. Where's the best place to find the Greta world and be part of it?
Okay, well, so I have a reader group on Facebook. It's called Whisperites Unite. Or you can just come to Greta Rose West on Facebook. And then I'm on Instagram, which is kind of my favorite social media platform. That's kind of the most fun for me. because I love stories. I love Instagram stories. I love playing in those. Uh, and I've met a lot of really cool people on Instagram through Instagram. So I'm on Instagram. It's just at Greta Rose West. And then my website, gretarosewest.com.
Love it. I love it.
I'm
And
not on TikTok. I got kicked off TikTok. They don't,
oh no.
yeah, I mean, everybody was like, oh, just make a new account. But I really have no interest in being on TikTok. I hate making TikTok videos. I was miserable trying to do it anyway. So they kicked me off and I actually kind of felt relieved. And they kicked me off from something I tried to post about an MM book. All the naughty bits were covered up, and I had seen other people posting things similar to what I posted. So
yeah,
I'm not going to comment on that, but
not
I
meant to
just,
be.
well, if you don't want me there, then I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad.
And I think that's the beautiful thing, right? Is that as readers and other authors, like we can have our spaces that we enjoy, and that's the most important thing. And our books being out in the world is the most important thing. Like at the end of the day, the social side of it is fun on top of that. And you actually share a lot of music in your stories, don't you?
Oh yes.
Yeah. And that's what I really love. Like I'm fascinated by what people are kind of listening to or in the vibe of and all the rest of it. So
yeah. Well, I make playlists for them all. You can find them on my website. I make a playlist for every book, and then I listen to it obsessively for months. Like still, I've been listening to Frank's playlist now for since like October or something. My husband's probably like, oh my God, not that song again. But once I make the playlist, then that's the only thing I can listen to when I'm working on the book. So yeah. So I share them on the Instagram stories, and then I post them on my website.
I love it. I love it. And we'll make sure to link up everything in the show notes with the episode as well. So it's nice and easy to find. Well, I just absolutely love this conversation. Thank you so much for coming and being part of our Successful Witches community. And no doubt we will be having another conversation because there was just so much to talk about here. And yeah, I can't wait for Frank. I cannot wait for Frank.
Me too.
Best bet, I'm going to be like downloading straight away. So thank you for being here. Bye, everybody.
Having me.